Today we are starting backend development. Until now, we created front-end pages using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and Next.js. We also deployed our front-end application on Vercel. But most real applications cannot work using front-end code alone. Suppose we create a course platform. The front-end may display a list of courses, student profiles, enrollment information, test scores, payment history. But where does this information come from? Usually the frontend asks a backend for this data. The communication between the frontend and backend commonly happens through an API. So today we will understand what an API is. We will call a public API directly from the browser and then test it using Thunder client. Before looking at code, let us understand APIs through a simple example. Imagine that you visit a restaurant. You are the customer. The kitchen prepares the food. But normally you do not enter the kitchen and prepare it yourself. You give your order to a waiter. The waiter takes your request to the kitchen. The kitchen prepares the food and the waiter brings the response back to you. In this example, customer equals frontend, waiter equals API, kitchen equals backend, order equals request, food equals response. The frontend does not need to know exactly how the backend stores or prepares the data. It only needs to know where to send the request, what information to send, what type of response it will receive. That agreed method of communication is provided through an API. What is an API? So API stands for Application Programming Interface. An API is a way for two software applications to communicate with each other. In a web application, the frontend commonly sends an HTTP request to a backend API. The backend receives the request, performs some operation, and sends a response. The basic flow looks like this: frontend, request, backend, and backend response frontend. For example, when a student opens the course page, frontend says, please give me the available courses, and backend says, here's the course data. The backend may retrieve that information from a database before sending it back. The complete flow can therefore look like this. Frontend makes a request to backend API. Backend API queries a database. Database gets data from backend. Database gives data to backend API, and backend API gives response to frontend. Now you will frequently hear two terms while discussing APIs: client, server. The client is the application making the request. It could be a web browser, a React application, a Next.js application, a mobile application, Postman, Thunder client. The server receives the request and returns a response. For this lesson, the browser or Thunder client is client, while the public API is server. A client does not necessarily means a person. It means the software asking another system for something. Now I will open the browser and visit this URL. We can see some data displayed on the screen. It may initially look difficult to read, but this is simply structured data. The API has returned a list of users. Every user contains information such as ID, name, username, email, address, phone, website, company. This format is called JSON. What is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON is one of the most common formats used to transfer data from between a frontend and backend. A simple JSON object looks like this. So let me show you the cursor screen. So this is a simple JSON data. It has a curly brace, then it has some fields, colon their value. A list of objects is represented using square brackets. So this is also JSON data containing two objects. The frontend can receive this JSON and display it as user cards, table rows, drop-down options, or any other interface. Users generally do not see raw JSON. The frontend transforms this data into a visually useful interface. For example, my API response can be this. This is my API response. Whereas my frontend can display it like this. So the URL we opened is called an API endpoint. The HTTPS JSON placeholder dot type. This URL you can also try to open. URL that we opened is this. This is called an API endpoint. An endpoint is a specific URL through which we access a particular resource or operation. Here the resource is /users. Therefore, this endpoint returns users. Now let us open a different URL. This is ending in slash posts. Earlier one was ending at /users. This endpoint returns posts. So the backend can expose different endpoints for different resources. /users, /posts, /courses, /inquiries, /orders, /payments. In our future backend, we might create endpoints such as /courses, /students, /inquiries. The /users endpoint returns all users. But suppose we only need the user whose ID is 1. So we open this. So here you can see after /users there is /1. So it will only give me ID of user, the data of user 1, user with ID 1. So you can see this is matching. So the API returns one user rather than the complete list. Let's compare these two endpoints /get /users and get /users /1. The first one asks for all users. The second one asks for the user with ID 1. The value 1 is being used to identify a particular resource. When we enter the URL in the browser, several things happen. So this is our request response cycle. Let me write it down in the cursor. So when we enter the URL in the browser, several things happen. So first is the browser sends a request. The second thing is the request reached the server. The third thing is the server identified the /users endpoint. Then the fourth, the server prepared the user data. Then the server returned an HTTP response. And finally, the browser displayed the response. This complete process is called the request response cycle. This usually happens within milliseconds. The browser is useful for quickly testing simple GET requests. So there are multiple kinds of requests like get, post, put, delete. Get request is can be tested by browser. However, to test other operations, for example, we may want to create a new user, submit an inquiry, update a course, delete a post, send authentication information, add custom headers, send a JSON request body. Entering a URL in the browser is not convenient for all these operations. That is why developers use tools such as Postman, Client, Insomnia, Bruno. Today I will use Client, but the concepts are the same in Postman. So I will create a GET request. Let me open Client inside cursor. There is some error. Let me try again. Okay, so I think there is some error in cursor. To install Client, you will go to this Explorer tab and type the Client. Click on that and then install it. Let me reopen cursor and I think it should get resolved if I reopen it. So when we install something, then these kind of errors can appear. I had just installed Client, so maybe that is causing some error. And also cursor, people are building cursor, so there are many bugs inside this software. And that is the reality. We must bear the bugs that are there in the software. We should not get frustrated by the bugs. We should learn how to live with them. So let me try it out. It is activating the extensions. Let me share the cursor screen to you. So it is still showing this error. Uh, Let me show you the error here. Let me copy it and paste here. So I am asking the cursor agent why this error is appearing in Client extension. Let us see what does it respond. It is set as auto, so it will choose the correct model on its own. So there are different modes in cursor. So if I don't switch auto, then I can choose a specific model. But if I choose auto, then it will choose the best model on its own. The best model will take like with the proper cost. So we have already done this. Okay, so these things are not working. So what we can do is we can try it with Postman. So let me open Postman online. There are two ways to use Postman. One is by downloading it, and the second option is to use it online. So I need to log into Postman. I need to create a workspace. So once I have created a workspace, I will share this screen. Okay, so let me share it. Now let me make a request. I will select the method as get. So it is already been selected. Now this is the URL and I send it. So I should see the same response that I was getting in the browser. Yes, the same response. On the request side, we have HTTP method, URL, headers, query parameters, body. On the response side, we have status code, response time, response size, headers, response body. The response body contains the JSON data returned by the server. Now, what does get mean? Get is an HTTP method. It tells the backend what kind of operation the client wants to perform. An HTTP method tells the backend what kind of operation the client wants to perform. Get means give me some data. Examples can be get slash users, get slash courses, get slash post slash one. Get requests should normally retrieve data rather than modify it. The four most common HTTP methods are get, post, put or patch, and delete. And their general meanings are get is for read data, post is for create new data. Let me write it down in the sketchpad. So these are the HTTP requests. So get is for read data, post is to create new data, put is to replace existing data, patch is to update part of existing data, and delete is for deleting the data. For a course platform, the endpoints could look like this: get slash courses, return all courses, and if we write get slash courses slash 5, then it should return course number 5. And post slash courses should create a new course. Patch slash courses slash 5 should update course number 5, and delete slash courses slash 5 should delete course number 5. These operations are often called CRUD. So what does CRUD means? CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. After sending the GET request, look at the response status. Let me share the Postman screen. So you should see 200 space OK. A status code tells the client what happened to the request. Some common status codes are, let me write this in the sketchpad. So these are the common status codes. 200 for OK, 201 for created, 400 for bad request, 401 for unauthorized, 403 for forbidden, 404 for not found, and 500 for internal server error. Simple interpretation is 2xx means request succeeded, 4xx means something is wrong with the client's request, and 5xx means something went wrong on the server. For example, 200 means the request succeeded, 404 the requested resource or endpoint could not be found, and 500 means the backend encountered an unexpected error. So let's change the result to something that does not exist. Let me share the Postman screen, and let me type this request. So here unknown resource, this URL does not exist in action. So it will give me 404 not found. So it depends on the API, you may receive an empty object or a 404 response. Now I can also try another URL, and this is also not found. This post does not exist. So APIs may handle missing resources differently. A well-designed backend should send an appropriate status code and a useful error message. For example, a message can be post not found. Rather than not found, it can be better can be post not found. Frontend applications use this information to show messages such as unable to find the requested post. Now create a new request and select post. So I will be using this endpoint. Let's create a new request. I choose post as the method request method, and this is my endpoint. Now go to the JSON body section and enter this. So I go to JSON body, click on body, it is JSON raw, and I am pasting this data. Now let's click send. So the server returns a response which with this JSON, and it gives me a status code as 201 created. So the important point is that we sent information to the backend in the request body. The server processed it and returned the created request. JSON placeholder is a testing API, so it simulates creation. Simulates the creation. It does not permanently save the new post. But in real API, we will permanently save the new post. It is this JSON, the API that we are using, JSON placeholder. This is a simulated. This is testing API. Now, what is the request body? The request body contains information sent from the client to the backend. For example, when a user submits a course inquiry form, the frontend might send name, email, and course like this. Like this is the JSON body, right? The body is most commonly used with post, put, or patch. In get request usually do not require request body. Now, now headers. An HTTP request can also contain headers. Headers provide additional information about the request. One common header is content type application JSON. So this one is should already be there. Content type application JSON. This tells the backend the request body contains JSON. Another common header is authorization colon bearer token. So another can be authorization, and inside this the value can be bearer and space then the token. Token can be a very large string. This can be used to send authentication information. For now, remember body equals main data being sent, headers equals additional information about the request. Now, how a frontend calls an API. When a user, let me write this down in the sketchpad. Now, how a frontend calls an API. When a user opens a page, the frontend can run JavaScript code that asks the backend for data. A simple request will look like this. So, for now, understand the flow. Fetch sends the request, response.json reads the JSON, users contains the returned data. The frontend can then loop through the users and display them on the screen. Suppose a student visits a course platform. The frontend initially displays loading courses. It then sends get/courses. The backend responses with the data like this. Um, ID, something like this kind of data. The frontend uses this response to create two postcards. The user sees a polished interface, but behind the scenes, the page is using API data. This is why real applications do not usually hardcode everything inside the frontend. The backend becomes the central source of data. So an API and a backend are related, but they are not exactly the same thing. The backend may contain, so this is our API versus backend. These are not the same thing. An API, the backend may contain these things. The business logic, database operations, authentication logic, payment processing. email services, file storage, API endpoints. The API is the interface through which clients communicate with that backend. So what is an API? The API is that interface through which clients communicate with that backend. A backend can expose an API and multiple clients can use the same API. They're going to see different clients like a web application, mobile app, admin dashboard, and they're using the same backend API. So all these three applications may use the same backend API: the web application, mobile app, or admin dashboard. Now, finally, let us discuss some common mistakes while understanding this concept. First mistake is thinking an API is a database. An API may read data from a database, but the API itself is not necessarily the database. So the flow is like frontend, then API, then backend, then database. Second mistake is thinking every URL is an API. A normal website URL returns an HTML page. An API endpoint commonly returns structured data such as JSON. Third mistake is ignoring the HTTP method. These two requests are not the same. The get courses and post courses, although their endpoint is the same, but the request are the slash courses part is the same, but the request is not the same. The URL may be similar, but the request operation is different. Do not check. And the fourth mistake is ignoring status codes. So do not only check the response body, also check whether the state is 200, 201, 400, 404, or 500. And fifth mistake is exposing the secret keys. Never place private API keys directly inside public frontend code. Anything sent to the browser can potentially be inspected by the user. Secret keys should normally be protected on the backend or stored securely using environment variables. So let's recap now. Today we learned that an API allows different software systems to communicate. The main flow is client sends request, server processes request, server sends response, client uses response. We also learned endpoint means the URL for a protected API, particular API operation. Method is type of operation. Headers is additional request information, and body is data sent with the request. JSON is the common data transfer format, and the status code is the result of the request. The common HTTP methods are get, which is used to read, post to create, patch to update, and delete to delete. Now your task for today. So complete these four requests. And for the post request, send this. And for every request, note the HTTP method, endpoint, status body, and response body. And this is one bonus task. Find one additional public API and inspect its JSON response. So you need to test the JSON placeholder API, the one that we used in this video. Now, in the next lesson, we will stop using someone else's backend. We will create our own backend API using Fast API. We will build endpoints such as /health/courses. Then we will return our own JSON data from the server.